floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. After this very inspiring speech from Joe, we'll have to keep the level. There has been a lot of exciting developments around blockchain over the past 2 years. But I must also say, with this, there has also been a lot of hype, with all due respect to what Joe said earlier. So the challenge for us today is to distinguish between the hype and the tangible benefits for the securities industry, and eventually identify opportunities for CSDs. So we have an eminent panel with us today to guide us on this path. So let me quickly introduce. We have Ms. Lina Hedia, CEO of Chaintech Dubai. We have Alex Chekhanov, Chief Architect, NSD Russia. Timothy Hogburn, Chief Operating Officer, ASX Australia. Charlie Shin, Head of Innovative Technology, KSD Korea. And Andre Eduardo De Marco, Director of Depository and OTC Operations, B3 Brazil. So to start with, we are going to invite our panelists to tell us briefly what they are doing currently in the blockchain space, and then we'll start firing the questions. So we'll start first with Lina.
Pleasure to be here. Marrakesh is a beautiful place, and I see a lot of old colleagues. So I come from a financial technology background and started working with blockchain with ConsenSys in Dubai in 2017 to execute one of the most prominent projects where the government of Dubai wanted to set up a blockchain strategy for all of the entities in the government. And this proved to be a huge success. It was one of the pioneering projects for a government, and until today, it attracts a lot of interest from other governments, and it won a lot of accolades, and it was really an eye-opener for the government of Dubai as well as the companies, ConsenSys, that participated. And at that time, I joined ConsenSys. That was March of 2017, helped them execute the project and set up their presence out of Dubai. And we started really operating in the region and taking other projects. And then recently, just in last month, I set up my own venture in order to focus on digital assets. So now I'm consulting with some of the ATSs and exchanges to look at digital assets and focus on that space.
Thank you, Lina. Maybe Alex, you can tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Alexander Chekhanov. I'm Chief Architect at the National Settlement Depository of Russia. Overall, my main responsibility within NSD is to make sure that the enterprise platform, all the systems and all the IT functions that we have at NSD are a good fit for the business that we're running. And as we look towards more diversification in the business, that obviously requires significant changes from the platform. So I've been working with blockchain pretty much since I joined NSD 2.5 years ago. NSD very early recognized the potential for disruption to the business model that we run that can come with a blockchain. So we've invested quite a bit of time and effort into understanding how blockchain can change the business model that we use, how it can change the function that we play as market infrastructure. So towards understanding that, we've run quite a few projects and have done quite a bit of theoretical research as well. So on the theory side, about 3 years ago, NSD, together with several other CSDs, like Straight and Six, we've started a working group of CSDs where we researched how blockchain can affect CSDs and financial market infrastructure overall. Since then, that group has grown to over 30 CSDs and other market participants like global custodians, and now operates under the ISA DLT working group. As far as the projects go, we've done also quite a few. We started with proxy voting prototype. We've done several issues of commercial papers, including coupon payments, redemption of these papers, and cash settlement. We've also looked at, we did a repo operation on blockchain. We've registered an ICO in the Russian CSD, and we also run a distributed digital depository project for the global market, which we aim to be a way for digital assets to be circulated in a compliant and safe and reliable way, in a way that we're used to when we talk about securities. So I've been involved in most of these initiatives quite deeply, and the working group that I mentioned I've been leading since pretty much the beginning of that working group. So that's
Thank you.
my story.
Thank you, Alex. Tim, I think you have a very hot project going on. Maybe you can tell us about it.
A hot project. Well, some would think it's a bit left field that an organisation that runs critical market infrastructure would sort of take a leadership position in blockchain. But when you consider 25 years ago, it was the ASX, which was one of the first exchanges to dematerialise the securities or equity industry and move off of paper to relational databases, as Joseph touched on before. It makes sense that we're looking now at the next frontier of the use of technology in post-trade. And, 25 years ago, the focus was risk reduction, fixed settlement periods, DVP. I think we're moving on from that now to how can we offer new product and services in a space in post-trade and central depositories, which is relatively untapped. And, we've spent a tremendous amount of time looking at the new technology, and it was quite fortuitous in the timing in that around 2014 we were upgrading these parts of our technology business, and the hype and the commentary around blockchain was at fever pitch at the time, so would have been a bit naive if we didn't consider it. And so we spent a fair bit of time looking at it both functionally and non-functionally, and sort of, while not professing to be experts in all the uses of a blockchain or distributed ledger technology, we sort of have worked out where it can benefit financial markets. And that has everything to do with the liberalisation and security of data. And knowing at any point in time that you have perfect certainty that the access to your data in real time is of high integrity and the source of truth is obviously the key. And a precondition to a lot of stuff we've talked about around automation and straight-through processing, about efficiencies in capital, about efficiencies in administration, you need that access to that type of data. So it made sense for us. And when you consider that, the new technology frontier seems to be diluting all our traditional boundaries as we know them today. The consumer is definitely getting a better proposition out of it, but the big winners seem to be the big tech companies and the fintechs. Why? Because they're not sitting on all this legacy infrastructure that firms like ours are sitting on. So the challenge for us is to liberalise the data we're sitting on. These tech firms and fintechs, they have organised their data in a way that they can get access to it very quickly, and that's hence where the consumer is benefiting. They don't have the legacy. They're in cloud. They have no sunk cost around infrastructure. They can move very quickly. So for organisations like ours, in moving to that point of getting that data available in a secure format and a lot quicker than it is today is the key. But that's really and damn hard and complex to do. I'm happy to say at the ASX we are doing that. We have taken this on. We started in 2014 with our partner Digital Asset and have moved very progressively. I would say it's been breathtaking, to sum it up in one word. We're at a point in 2021 where we will replace a piece of our critical market infrastructure in post-trade equity settlement, which around $2.5 trillion of assets sit on in the first quarter to first half of 2021. That has considered many things around ownership, hierarchies, corporate actions, transfers and conversions, anything in our space. It has considered and it has proven from a functional and non-functional perspective. We continue to take software drops from Digital Asset. Everything is on track and we are progressing to date. But the more we explore and the more we get to know this technology, I think the more opportunities are put in front of us. So we're not going to make all our participants and customers jump off the cliff and hold hands with us on day one. We will progressively roll out this technology so people can get an understanding of it and how they want to use it. That'll take some time. So we will continue to offer messaging structures through ISO standardization, which will enable people to use our blockchain. But it is going to be some time before all our customers move to that fully network of nodes and operating under that basis.
Thank you, Tim. Charlie, can you tell us what you're doing at the KSD in blockchain?
Good morning, everyone. Actually, I prepared a slide and
Monica, the slides.
Okay. Thank you. It's a great pleasure for me to share my thought. Yes. Thank you. Okay. We have been doing some POC project and a pilot project during recent years. And 2 years ago, we conducted the POC project on our e-voting service. And the reasons why we chose this e-voting service were because of its simplicity of business process, and at that time we thought we might be able to find some ways to enhance the trust and maybe the security of our service with blockchain. So as you can see, the left part is the very familiar system, the legacy system, with database and web application software, and the right part is the POC project system. So after processing the voting service, then the transaction is transferred to the right side, the blockchain system. So at that time, we chose a Hyperledger Fabric platform. And the reason why we chose the Fabric was we were interested in the permissioned network from the beginning, and we have been the general member of Hyperledger Consortium. As you can see here, the blocks are created and attached to the previous one in each node. We have 4 nodes, for example, here: KST node, regulator node, and issuer 1 and 2. So the KST and all the other nodes, they can create their own transactions, but the regulator, they can only see and audit the transactions in the DLT network. And as you can see, the blocks are different, so only the issuer 1 can access their own data, and the issuer 2 can access their own data. So this is the description of our POC project. And next one is our pilot project. We performed it last year, and the structure is about the same, but at this time we applied the cloud. And after realizing that the maintaining a node, the distribute node is not an easy work. So if we ask our participants to maintain their own system, then they won't like it. So we applied the cloud system at the time. And to increase the privacy or security, we applied some kind of encryption with a symmetric approach. So as you can see here, every unique for every transaction or the a vote, unique key is generated by KSD, and the key is assigned to shared among the relevant parties. So I can say that we somehow increase the level of security of our system. And it's not in the slide, but we also perform the over-the-counter bond settlement with this DLT network. And so actually we transferred the logic of our legacy systems to this DLT network. And at that time, we focused on mostly in the performance of the DLT network. And our general finding is that it takes more than 50 times longer when we perform the transaction. So these are the things we have done in recent years. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Finally, Andre, can you tell us what you're doing at BeFree?
Yes, yes. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. Last night I was thinking that I was in Brazil because of the food and the music that we heard. It was perfect. Thank you, Monica, for the opportunity. So in Brazil, we are looking for the blockchain technology, the DLT, since 2016. And after years investing in trading side and post-trading side, especially on the clearing and CCP model, we have the challenge to invest and to replace our CSD platform. Since the merge between BM&F Bovespa and also CTP, the OTC market, we have two platforms for CSD. But in fact, in Brazil, I don't know if in the rest of the world is the same, the industry for bookkeeping, custodians, administrator, managers, they are on the old fashion. I mean, they have old process, old ways to work with the CSD. And instead of having the decision to replace the technology, we have firstly to replace the process. I mean, instead of having the decision to invest money in change the technology, we have to invest time to observe the process and to replace process. And why? Because it's easier to replace process than replace technology. We have the support from the regulator in Brazil. They really believe that KYC and AML, there are something that we can invest in this new technology because everybody in Brazil replicate the process for KYC and AML. And another thing that we have the replication in Brazil and everybody's losing money with this is the reconciliation process. And for me, especially for me, is not a B3 position, but it's my position. Blockchain and DLT has value if you deliver value for the final investor. If you can deliver the value for the final investor, all the investors in a market see the value and they can believe in this technology. If you replace the technology only to get more spread to the intermediaries, it doesn't take any advantage to replace the technology. So that's the new purpose of this new technology in the capital markets and in the financial markets.
Thank you, Andre. Okay, so we'll start by looking at the hype first, and then we'll gradually move towards opportunities. In August last year, Gartner, the global research advisory firm, asserted that blockchain has entered the trough of disillusionment with regards to the technology's life cycle of hype and adoption. So according to the Gartner Trend Insight report, blockchain technical capabilities are evolving, but fail to match the extreme hype and are not yet sufficient for mission-critical enterprise use. I'm not saying this is from Gartner, just in case. So what Gartner says, the market will traverse the trough of disillusionment before significant value is realized, and this is expected to happen within the next 5 to 10 years. So Lina, can you tell us what are your views on this, especially in relation to the use of blockchain in the securities industry?
Sure, my pleasure. First of all, definitely like any new innovation and technology, there is a cycle that this technology has to go through. So Gartner definitely right in terms of stating the fact that this is going to take some time in order to come to fruition. And I tie this back to the work we did with the government of Dubai. It was an eye-opener into the impact and the art of the possible, but also an eye-opener into the application and the challenges to apply blockchain technology to various business sectors in real life. Having said that, I differ quite substantially on the timeline. I think, especially for financial services, the time is now. There is an evolution that is really taking hold across the financial sector. Digital assets, tokenization stand to free up to almost $500 trillion of liquidity that's bursting to go out, and to go out to the ultimate investor, as mentioned by our colleagues here. And I don't think that everybody's going to stand and wait for this to be grabbed by others. I think there is a lot of interest from all of the market participants, the market infrastructures for sure, but also every stakeholder out there. We see the likes of JP Morgan, everybody taking participation. Institutional investors are coming into play. So the change is much more rapid than anticipated previously. And I believe it's going to accelerate, and definitely it's going to make sure that there is a lot more inclusion, fractional ownership, freeing liquidity, but also the creation of new wealth. So this trillions of dollars is just the beginning, and there's going to be, I don't want to say democratization of wealth, but access to many more investors.
Thank you. Alex, Bitcoin was created with an adversarial context in mind after the 2008 financial crisis. And obviously the system was designed to come to convergence without any trusted party and to be censorship resistant. So the question is, does this adversarial context exist in the current security settlement system? Do the book entry records of ownership require the kind of protection that the Nakamoto consensus ensures? Basically, is there a case to eliminate the trusted party in security settlement?
Well, that's several questions in one. Yes. First of all, it's my honest belief that centralization is a tool, and just like decentralization is a tool. So decentralization will, and blockchain that promises to bring it, will not eliminate centralization as a thing at all, because centralization was created because it's efficient, because it makes sense to centralize, to create economies of scale. That's more or less the foundation of modern economy. So to say that with blockchain we'll get rid of that completely, to me that doesn't make any sense. Then for trusted parties in particular, I would say that, in blockchain today, what we see is that when you talk to a hedge fund who is looking to invest into crypto assets, when you talk to someone who needs to have custody service for their crypto assets, what they look for is trust. They look for institutions which have significant trust attached to them, that have earned this trust, and whom they can trust that they will not be gone out of the market within half a year. And as you know, despite all the promises that blockchain brings, we have crypto exchanges who have disappeared continuously over time, including recently. We've had various scams happening on the public blockchains, which are governed by proof of work and this original idea of the consensus. So the problem of trust is not gone with blockchain implementations. And the other thing is that the algorithm that is supposed to provide us with this trust, the consensus algorithm, the trust is not derived from the algorithm itself. The algorithm sets certain framework that creates incentives for the participants on the market. And with these incentives, obviously the start of Bitcoin was that a lot of people had the mining equipment at their home computers, but then it starts consolidating over certain power centers. And today, most of the mining equipment is centered over very few companies. mining pools. So that is still centralization of trust. And these companies, they have to be trusted if you are to trust in the network. And today they're not regulated. So in a way, that is even less trust, because we haven't run into a scenario yet where it makes sense for these companies to break this trust. But as soon as some crisis arrives, power abuse will happen. And today the power is already sufficiently consolidated there. So to answer your question, I don't believe that the need for trusted parties will be gone. It can be transformed, because certainly the ecosystem that is centered around blockchain is different compared to what we have in a traditional world that we run today. But I don't believe that the need for trust and the need for earning trust within particular organizations will be gone. It's simply efficient to organize the market that way.
Okay, thank you. So this takes me to my next question. If the trusted party is still needed somewhere, so with this current market structure, Tim, what problems we are trying to solve with blockchain that cannot be solved by existing systems in a more cost-effective manner? For example, I don't know, reconciliation issues could be addressed by having securities registered at beneficial owner level at the CSD. I mean, what is it that we are not able to do currently with systems in a cost-effective manner?
And that's a very valid question, and everyone should ask themselves that question before leaping into the world of blockchain, because it can be a fit for purpose. But there's probably a twofold approach here. There's a cost-out approach, and then there's a new service approach. The blockchain technology, in conjunction with a modeling language that enables you to write applications that are relatively fast and secure over the blockchain, is the key for empowering others to access their permission data. And Joseph mentioned this before about an issuer, for example, who has issuance on your ledger or your safekeeping, and giving them that dynamic access to that information rather than them having to wait 2 or 3 days to see who's on their register is quite important. Now, that doesn't just become because someone's created a database and written a bit of code on the top of it. There's a lot of security, obviously, with information like that needs to be overlaid on that. And there's a lot of permissioning and access that needs to be laid over that. So if you look at the benefits that blockchain technology can derive, it goes back to that real-time, perfect certainty around the data that's sitting in the database that you're accessing, and the need no longer to have to reconcile against that. From a cost-out perspective, for me, and looking at the CSDs and the services they provide, they have a great opportunity to mutualise the costs of their clients in the industry, those who are using their services and tapping their services. So it's all about, the admission to play these days, and it's expensive to do that. So if you can get your cost out and you can run mutualised functions, and that mutualised function might be running a central database on behalf of all your customers and giving them access to parts of that database that they own and they can use. So why then do they need to have that huge sunk technology cost in creating these infrastructures and supporting and maintaining these infrastructures when it can be maintained and be secure and be available and permissioned to those who need it? So I think there's a twofold answer there, but it's I would always tread with caution and make sure you just don't leap to satisfy your board of directors that we're all across this blockchain thing, because there might be other solutions that might be right for you.
Yeah, thank you. So Charlie, related question. With pre-funding, currently we can achieve real-time settlement with existing systems. Not a problem at all. But obviously, this is not favored by investors because of asset commitment and other risks. Yet I tried to look at, for example, how a blockchain-based system called LiquidShare is achieving near real-time settlement. And what I found out is that the system ensures that the necessary cash and securities are reserved in the smart contract system before transmitting the orders to the trading system. This is something that I quoted from LiquidShare. So again, we see there's pre-funding here. So where's the value addition of a blockchain-based system here?
It's a very hard question. My thought about this DRT network is that let's not put new wine into old bottles. So in this case, the old bottles means our legacy system. And as you know, our legacy systems are very cost efficient and they are running very well. And we are familiar with it and it's eco-friendly. And anyway, regarding this liquid share case, my understanding is limited. And I can maybe, I heard about this from the news, and my understanding is that this system seems like a hybrid model using the legacy settlement service and also using the DLT-based matching and DBP service. So I can only say some general advantages and disadvantages of DLT system. So in this case, I guess, because the stakeholders like small and middle-sized enterprises and the regulatory bodies and participants can directly access this DLT network. So we can say that the market becomes more transparent, and also maybe the data leverage can be enhanced. So those are the kind of advantages we can expect from this DLT network. And I can think of some disadvantages. And this, each institution must own and maintain its own distributed node, and it's going to be a burden. And also, in our legacy system, the roles and the responsibilities are very clear. So the boundary of responsibility and the flow of control are there very clear and easy to understand. But with this DLT network, the basic concept is that anyone can do anything without the central party or the intermediary. So maybe it's going to be uneasy when bad thing happens in the DLT network. So it's a problem of responsibility. And another thing I can think about is about the investment strategy. So even though we encrypt or to hash the data we share through the DLT network, somehow others can figure out how many transactions we make. So there will be some institutions who don't like their strategies revealed and shared through the network. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. And finally, Andre, blockchain can be useful, we are seeing it in OTC trading. But do you think it's appropriate for exchange trading, where efficient, fair, transparent price discovery is of the essence? For example, I've looked at, for example, some of the crypto exchanges, how they operate, and I've seen that the matching actually occurs off-chain. So that's one of the things. And also, for the settlement of OTC trade, peer-to-peer, blockchain seems appropriate. But can it add value in centralized clearing and settlement, where netting is important for efficiency and managing liquidity and counterparty risk?
So first of all, I see value on the blockchain technology for the OTC market. We are studying in Brazil the TR infrastructure, mainly to receive the register from the banks and of course reduce cost for them and for the clients. But if you look to the netting, John said something about the netting, because netting is important because you can save more money and you can introduce and provoke more efficiency to the market. Of course, that the gross settlement is very quick and very easy to the blockchain technology. But one of the things that's more, or the hottest thing that is discussing in Brazil is the governance. The governance is very important. Who will be the business network ownership of this new technology? Because the regulator in Brazil is waiting for this decision. They need some information, they need some structured information, and this is something that you can deliver to the regulator, and after the discussion be done by the market and also the exchange. But come back to your question, I believe that OTC, mainly because of the dynamic of the market, is easier to be implemented than the listed market and the trading, especially the centralized order book, that they have the price formation each microsecond. Blockchain is not for this, in my opinion.
Thank you, Andre. We are seeing a lot of proof of concepts these days, but around permission chains. So Lina, the key feature about blockchain is that it provides a public record that everyone can see, but they can't change it. So parties can transact even if they don't know each other, and this is why a public chain is needed. And Joe talked about trust earlier. But are we not missing the point with permission chain as opposed to public chains?
Thank you. So trust is indeed the, the driving, one of the driving factors that, trigger people to use blockchain. In financial services, you need some kind of access authorization and governance of whatever infrastructure is there to be used by the members. So permissioning and private permissioned blockchains are definitely needed in certain applications, financial services being one of those, and especially in capital markets realm. Other financial transactions can possibly happen, like payments and micropayments and whatnot. You don't need, you have to be on the public blockchain. But private and permissioned blockchains are going to be very useful. And there is another parallel that we like to draw between this and the beginnings of the internet, when we used to talk about intranets and extranets. These terms disappeared completely today because there is a lot of access and security and firewalling and all of that, where you can create accessibility that is authorized. And the same is going to be happening as well in the realm of blockchain. Interoperability is a big theme. It's going to be driving a lot of the growth going forward. And we see a lot of focus on working and ensuring interoperability between private infrastructures. So permissioning and private permission blockchains are a very useful application of the technology.
Thank you, Lina. Alex, we come back to market structure. According to you, how will the market structure evolve within the next 5 to 10 years? Can this vision, I will call it utopian vision, of having a global chain linking issuers to investors directly, where transactions are executed and settled in real time without pre-funding, you think, can this become a reality in the next 5 years?
Well, if I knew how exactly would the markets look like 5 or 10 years from now, I would be betting all my money on that and preparing to be really rich of that. Well, my belief is that blockchain, despite numerous advantages that it has the potential to offer, it's a very difficult technology to actually practically implement, because probably nearly everyone in this room has faced implementing some kind of public API. That probably did not go very easily. That is a difficult problem to solve. Or if you're implementing something like an enterprise service bus in your organization, I imagine many people have struggled with that as well. And these are just point problems. Some of them are even solved within your organization by itself without impacting your clients. Blockchain, to be efficient, blockchain requires that you implement it for the whole market at once, or at least for a significant portion of that market. And it also requires new kinds of integration. It also requires some kind of changes in interpretation of how the current laws and regulations apply to this new solution that you designed, because clearly it's different from what we're used to. And it also requires new approach to information security with a different way of how we share data and different implications of how this data can be attacked, how privacy can be breached, how banking secrecy can be breached. All of these are solvable. I strongly believe that. I believe the technology will manage to solve that as soon as we have use cases that really demand for the solutions. The same goes for all the other issues that are sometimes quoted on blockchain, like performance or anything like that. But solving them all at once is very difficult. Solving even one of them is difficult and takes time and effort. So that's why, well, implementing blockchain for your market, for your ecosystem, changing the processes that are run in this ecosystem, the difficulty of that, I believe, can be pierced in two ways. One is something like what Tim is doing, the top-down approach, and the other one is when you take a new piece of market, some kind of small emerging market that is not yet ridden with a lot of legacy, that is not yet well automated, or not well digitized, like real estate in most countries, or perhaps voting that is on paper still for many countries. So you take this bottom-up approach and build the ecosystem from the ground up there. So applying, I believe this is the easier way, but also less impactful for our main market of the securities. So from the bottom-up approach, I believe that we will see some kind of solutions that cover significant markets emerging within 5 years. The potential is certainly there. For the top-down, I believe it will take longer to reach some kind of, well, significant impact to really see the transformation. We'll see smaller things happening earlier, but, well, Tim mentioned this already, that they take it step by step, and I believe that will be the approach of most top-down implementations.
Can I just comment on that? I think it's right that just because, and the mass effect of any network is that you have everyone on adoption, and that's clearly, and we've seen great examples of that. But there's a stage there where you need to go through where people need to be comfortable with how their assets or data is being stored and used and accessed. So, you know, there are ways, and, you know, our vendor partner, Digital Asset, can ingest, you know, they can ingest ISO standard messaging, proprietary standard messaging, et cetera, convert it into ISO contracts in the blockchain, and it's irrelevant to the user sitting on the other side of it. They can continue to do business today as they do it today, and they've just got this blockchain database or ledger sitting on the back of it. That's fine, but they can get the benefits of it still with messaging. They don't have to jump to this direct access or node access to start getting some of the benefits from a blockchain. And that's, you know, a lot of people are threatened by the word blockchain, and that needs to be a message that we get out there. It's a message in Australia that we've made very clear that, as I mentioned before, we're not all holding hands and jumping off the cliff at once and moving to this node effect of a blockchain.
Yeah, but Charlie, let's assume that the market structure eventually evolves towards disintermediation, because, you know, eventually that's the ultimate goal of blockchain. We can go by different phases, but like Joe said, you know, at the end of the day, you want the trust to be in the system, and you don't need intermediaries or whatever. Let's say the market moves towards intermediation. So what role CSDs can play? Joe mentioned about governance, standards, and all that. Do you think CSDs have a role to play in this new landscape eventually?
It's a very big issue about, you know, designing our future. So I also, you know, prepared the image file here, and can you see here?
The slide? Yeah. Slide. Can we have the slide? It's okay, but you can try without the slide.
Okay, it's going to be a tough work. Okay, our current market is really, seamlessly pipelined, and the process goes very in a sequential manner, and the boundary of responsibility is very clear, and we are familiar with this architecture. And in the future, if this DLT network just comes to our market, then we might become one of them in a distributed node. However, there should be some roles we still can play in this distributed market. So, like the intermediaries like us, the market relies on us not only to enhance and accelerate the transactions, but also take care of and prepare for the abnormal cases. So whatever market structure we are going to have in the future, there should be cases where the direct stakeholders cannot solve the problem by themselves. So in that case, the intermediaries like us must intervene and coordinate and have them solve the problem. So I guess we will still have our roles in the future. And I think as I told you before, my main thought about this DLT is that let us not put new wine into old bottle. So the legacy system is old bottle, and the new wine is the DLT products. So I can think of our future that interact or interconnect the legacy market and the DLT market. We can play the role of interconnecting those two different markets. Yeah.
Yes, Lina, quickly.
Just a quick follow-up, very short. So disintermediation is one of the things that's going to happen out of blockchain, but I think the biggest and most important one is wealth creation, access to wealth. And from that perspective, if you think about CSDs, then the role is massive. What they can add in that formula is still great, from custody to other services that they can, use this wealth and help this wealth to be invested and grow. So I think disintermediation is not the ultimate end of blockchain. It is one of the things that's going to happen and is going to free up more wealth and give more access to more participants.
Thank you.
May I also quickly add another one?
Yes, Ali.
So blockchain certainly offers to disintermediate certain functions of CSD. The most obvious one being possibly maintaining the integrity of the issue, which is seen as one of the key things that CSD do today. But, why do we maintain the integrity of the issue? It's because that is something that we don't want market participants to do on their own, because then that would require us, the governments, to regulate the issuers, and the issuers, especially the smaller ones, will certainly not want to be regulated as financial institutions so that the investors can be sure that the issue integrity is properly maintained. So it's a function that is centralized for a reason. It's efficient to do that. If that goes away, there will certainly be more functions for us to centralize, because we don't want to push them on the issuers or some other institutions along the chain. The simple example would be if the technology and the algorithm maintains the integrity of the issue, someone has to maintain that technology. And for that technology to be open source, well, that's not the ultimate cure, right? Because open source technologies have seen very significant vulnerabilities. I don't know if the one Heartbleed means anything to you, but that's an example of one serious vulnerability in extremely popular public security protocol. So someone still has to look after the technology. And there will certainly be a lot more add-on technical services, that will be a different business model, a different thing that CSDs would do, more technical, but that's still a role that will certainly be there, and it's a good fit for CSDs.
Thank you. And Andre, do you think that at this stage, do we have a convergence of interests among the different stakeholders? Obviously, we are not talking about CSDs because we have our own interests, but our other stakeholders, I mean, obviously, issuers and investors, regulators, policymakers, those who make laws, regulators. So do you think that at this stage there is a convergence of interest for the adoption of DLT in mainstream financial markets?
I would say partially, not totally, because we have some convergence in terms of reducing costs, reducing systemic risk. But if you look to the regulators, for example, they have to preserve the market, the integrity. And if you look to the exchange, like as in Brazil, we are the self-regulatory exchange. So we have to keep the self-environment, and we act as a first regulator and helping the regulator. So that's why we have to keep our ears on the rail. I mean, we have to understand what's the new technology. We have to apply the new technology as the beginner, but we have to, first of all, as I said in the first question, we have to look to the process and increment and review the process in Brazil. Blockchain is a new technology, is secured, is immutable, but what we have to do is try to convince, especially the regulator in Brazil, that blockchain is available for everybody and deliver the value for the final investor.
I have one final question for Tim, because I think you're the ideal person to answer this, given what you're doing right now. Tim, is this technology mature for industrial scale use in mainstream markets? I mean, there are questions about scalability, security, robustness, performance, interoperability. Do you think all these are justified? And just quickly, I mean, I hope I'm not mistaken, Vitalik recently said, about the scalability trilemma, where he says that you can only have two out of decentralization, scalability, or security. So what are your views on this?
Quick few key points there. One is, yes, it is scalable. We have done a lot of testing around the non-functional aspects. It was mentioned before how many nodes have been connected around globally and tested. Two, interoperability. So the key to understanding this technology and blockchains talking to each other is to have standardized format of the transfer of information between blockchains and protocols and legals built around that. And three is the open sourcing. So while there are certainly some risks associated with open sourcing, but we are seeing now where the companies who have some programming language are now making or moving to open source models, and that is going to spur the development and the scalability of this technology a lot quicker than ever before.
Thank you, Tim. I think we have a few questions from the audience.
Yes, I would want first of all to thank the audience of the important number of questions. It means that the topic is a hot topic for everybody and for the industry. Because of the time, I will maybe use 2 or 3 questions. I would want to ask you to give very short answers if you can help me for that, so maybe can take 2 or 3 questions. The first one I want to share with you is the following. Is there a country where blockchain has been implemented by a CSD?
Tim?
I'm unsure on that.
You're still in the
Really
process.
focused in the southern hemisphere on that small island called Australia.
I'm not 100% sure if the CSD is involved, but I think the stock of change of Jamaica has done very significant investment, and I think they're live with some kind of crypto asset trading. Also, the exchange in Stuttgart, I believe, is doing something similar, but these are exchanges, not quite the CSDs.
If I may just add, yeah, there are a few exchanges that are launching platforms for trading digital assets. But that platform includes the settlement and the digital custody and everything.
Is blockchain economically feasible for smaller CSDs?
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's the same question as if you ask, is a CSD system feasible for a smaller CSD? Well, maybe if you have 10 trades per day, you can do it on paper, but as soon as you need a system, you have to solve that problem. Maybe not by building it in-house, but by buying or borrowing technology from someone else. But I think the answer here is the same. Blockchain doesn't introduce anything new.
I think the key thing is when we're trying to investigate a blockchain-based system, I think we shouldn't forget the bottom line, which is cost effectiveness.
Okay. What's the biggest barrier, according to your experience, that's slowing down the adoption of blockchain as a tech solution in the financial services?
I think the barrier is the absence of regulatory frameworks to back it up. It's not really just the technology, but one of the biggest barriers is that the regulators are slow and are being too cautious. So even the SEC's latest release was not very forthcoming or enlightening. So I think with more regulation going forth, there's going to be a lot more adoption.
And the reason for that is for blockchain to be efficient, it requires different processes, and different processes are difficult for the regulators to quickly address. So yeah, I fully agree with Lena, and the problem is quite big.
I would say it's also damn hard to find people. So ring fencing the talent you do have is really important, because people in this sphere are very hard, and they sit in garages in the dark with really big beards, and you can't find them. But when you do find them, grab them, ring fence them, and hold on to them.
Maybe one last question. Our last question would be to Tim. As AS6, the first institution that made its decision to replace chess system for clearing and settlement with DLT technology in large scale, what are the challenges that you face till now, and when the go live is planned?
Main challenges are bringing the stakeholder community along with you. I replaced a futures trading platform at the start of 2017, and no stakeholder or customer ever asked me to see the back end or the code of it. Everyone wants to see the blockchain and get a photo in front of it. I don't know why. It's not that exciting, but the challenge of the stakeholder bringing them along is significant, because it has been associated with threat to disintermediation, etc. So that's certainly a significant one. Then there's your boards who are making the investment to do this. You need to keep the executive and the board completely educated. And for me, that education has gone as far as Merkle trees. You wouldn't believe it, but some directors have gone into the nth degree of the leaves of the Merkle tree and how all that operates together. So the board, in making investments in this technology, needs to be educated as well. I don't think there's been any other organisation that has probably done as much education than we have, but that's a critical component of it. And then secondly is the non-functional aspects. So for those in the room that probably know something about Bitcoin, it processes about 7 transactions per second. In a market infrastructure like ours, where trading is occurring in thousands and thousands of trades a second, that's not good enough for us. So really testing and expanding that non-functional capability of this technology has been critical.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me to thank the panelists and the moderator for this very interesting session.